We're talking today with Jack Harris of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, now Jack, can you start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Lucas, Ohio, a rural village about midway between Columbus and Cleveland. My people were farmers. 1933 Prohibition was ending. It was boom times.
Wow.
My dad was a bootlegger.
Okay.
He learned the trade in high school. He was pretty much a hot shot. He pitched for the baseball team, quarterbacked. He did everything well, except he wasn't a very good student. He wasn't very committed to it. So I grew up in that period of time, 33 to World War II started. I was 7, 1941, and I can sure remember quite vividly life. But I spent. My mother and dad were divorced when I was 7, and I grew up in northern Michigan, near Traverse City on a farm, pretty much in the boondocks.
Okay, and was that a relative of your mother's or your father's?
Yeah, my stepfather was born and raised in northern Michigan along the banks of the Manistee River. Always wanted to be a farmer, and we moved up and lived on a farm for until I was 7, until I was 10, till I graduated from high school.
Okay.
7, 8 years.
Okay. And what high school did you graduate from?
Little town of Buckley, in the boondocks, about 20 miles south of Traverse City, about as far removed from the civilized town of Traverse City to the boondocks.
Yeah.
It was a pretty isolated spot. I got out of high school and went down to Michigan State, which at that time was coming on strong, trying to become a university, and did. And I was pretty much snowed coming down out of a little tiny high school in the country and going to Michigan State.
All right. Now, just to back up on a couple of things. One of them, World War II starts when you're only 7. Now, do you remember hearing about Pearl Harbor? Or?
Oh yeah, I remember our little town of Ashland. I remember the newspaper boys coming out on the streets selling extras. I never heard of such a thing, but they were waving the paper, we're at war, Japanese strike. So it was quite vivid. Then I knew that something big was happening. Everybody did.
And then as you got older, did you follow the news of the war and keep track?
Oh yeah. My mother and dad were divorced right 1941 when the war started, and they were divorced in 1941. Well, in 1941, if you were divorced, boom, you were in the military so fast that you couldn't even count it, which was happened to him. He was my dad was 30. Oh man, he close to 30 years old, which was not prime draft material, but he was drafted. And I spent the duration, 1941 to 1945, I guess, at the end of the war.
Did he go overseas, or did he?
He did. He served in Italy under Patton. Matter of fact, he was a cook for Patton. They didn't know what to do with him. 30 years old, he wasn't a good candidate for the infantry, and they asked him. Military was very good at sorting people out in those days.
Sometimes.
They said, what are you good at? And if I couldn't say that he was successful as a bootlegger, he owned a tavern, he sold alcohol for a while. And he said, well, I'm a pretty good cook. And they said, what do you cook? He said, well, he made awfully good sausage. Well, he ended up taking that recipe, cooking it for Patton's general staff, and generals live awfully well. They ate by candelabra and white tablecloths, and it was pretty good. So cooking for the general staff up through Africa, up to Italy, in the war was, as wars go, pretty good duty. Yeah, it was safe.
Okay. Now, as for yourself, though, you were too young to have to worry about going into that. But then, what year did you finish high school?
1951.
Okay. Now, the Korean War was going on at that point.
Anybody in 1951 who wasn't going to college, who wasn't enrolled in ROTC, went to the Army pretty quickly. So it was a dodge for me. 51, I was enrolled in ROTC. ROTC.
Okay.
And that was a safe, as long as you stayed in, you could finish college.
Okay.
If you had
So when
money.
you went to Michigan State, then you were in the ROTC as well as just taking classes. Okay. Now you said you got there and it was pretty tough for you because you weren't used to that. Was it the academics that were a problem, or just being in this big?
Well, I spent my high school years, and there were 13 in my graduating class. Nobody went to college. Totally ill prepared to deal with the academic experience.
Right.
So I stumbled through for a year, and sort of things happened. I dropped out at the end of the year, and within 6 months I was drafted. They were quick with it. Their paperwork was efficient, and the draft was universal. If you weren't in reserve officers training or some particular needy field, you went to the Army.
Right. Okay. So when did you have to report for duty?
April 1953.
Okay. All right. And where did you go for basic training?
Indiana. We loaded up in Traverse City, the draft class. I think there were 23 or so, 24 of us from the county who were drafted. It was the biggest draft call that they had since World War II. Everybody went. You were 17, 18 years old, and if you weren't doing something, that the government needed, you went to the Army.
Right. Now, when you registered for the draft, did you do a physical at that point, or do you do that later?
I did. I got called. Well, I was out of school. I knew I was going to have to go into the service, and I got the call in April, and I asked them, the draft board. I called and said, how long between the physical and active call? And they said, well, 2, maybe 3 months. So I thought, well, that's 2-3 months I can't use. So I asked if I could take my physical and go directly in, which I did. Still went in as a draftee with a 2-year commitment without having to enlist.
Right. Now, was the physical a very serious physical, or was it just very quick?
Oh, they were pretty fast. They turn your head and cough. I guess they used a stethoscope. There were no particular histories. I remember the physical must have taken, masses of people going through, but processed them by the numbers and very quickly.
Okay.
Very cursory.
So they weren't really weeding anybody out then?
Not very much, unless you were noticeably crippled or had some disability. You were called.
Right. Okay. So where in Indiana did you go?
Camp Atterbury.
Okay.
In the 50s, Atterbury, and before, it was a pretty active training camp. I think there were some 30,000 troops there maybe at one time. They were gradually phasing down, and I was one of the last groups to go through there in the basic training, 30 miles south of Indianapolis.
Right. Now, what did the basic training consist of when you were there?
Well, 16 weeks. You kind of hope that you get out of it with 8 weeks and get an assignment to go to school. I didn't. So I had 16 weeks of basic infantry training. How to use a rifle, how to use sidearms, how to throw hand grenades, how to shoot a machine gun. A lot of crazy things, how to use a bayonet, things like that. I don't know what practical application those ever had for anybody, but it was a far cry from what actual combat was going. I was 18 years old, 19 years old, and I wasn't going to go to combat. I knew that. I was smart, lucky, whatever it was going to be. I had no fear of particular fear that I was going to go to Korea and get my butt blown off. I figured I'd get out of that. I almost didn't. It was a matter of pretty good luck that I didn't. They needed numbers. There were vast numbers of military people in those days.
Yeah. But the armistice would have happened sometime around the time you finished training.
Of what?
Well, the armistice comes in the middle of 53.
I'm in the 15th week of advanced infantry training, and we knew it was coming, and the news was there that they were in negotiations. And I remember we were in our bivouac marching 20 miles out in the evening to get to our bivouac spot, and a Jeep come roaring up out of the dark, pulled up to the head of the line and said, "It's over." And they very quickly arranged to have trucks pick us up, so it was the end of the march. And that dissolved the sense of training, the sense of urgency was gone. And everybody knew at that point that they weren't going to get their asses blown off, and it was pretty loose training after that. The military had trouble with discipline with it, getting people convinced that it was worthwhile, and pretty disorganized. I was grateful, but I certainly was prepared after 16 weeks of infantry training. Had I gone into a combat zone, I would have had to been, totally reacclimated to how to survive.
Okay. Now, before they were announcing armistice, when you first got there to the camp, how much emphasis did they put on discipline?
Well, that was basic training, and the discipline of it. We were pretty loose. We were some of us were college kids who don't discipline well in that kind of a situation. And we actually had something of a rebellion in basic training that they were. We had some stupid things as were too much double timing, too much nitpicking, and so forth. The cadre, the officers were in the last few weeks were renting their cars, give guys leave so they could drive up to Detroit, for example. A sergeant could rent his car for, I don't know, $50, $100 a piece to guys, and they'd rent the cars or get the cars, drive up with half a dozen people, and spend 2 nights at home, maybe. A very, very corrupt situation.
All right. Now, had most of the cadre been to Korea?
Yeah, that was part of a requisite in order to be it didn't take much to teach military discipline. It wasn't the cream of the crop in the military, but non-commissioned officers and people who had experience in Korea was sort of primary duty. That you had the experience of having been in a combat zone, and being a trainer was probably pretty good duty.
Okay. But that may also have affected a little bit their attitude, because they had been there and done that.
Well, especially the fact that when the armistice was signed, the Russians are going to come over the hill. We knew everybody, they were propagating that, just a matter of time where we're going to have to be fighting the Russians, so you got to be ready for it. Well, we suspected that really wasn't the case. Most people did, so it wasn't a particularly good time in the military. They were trying to get rid of people. They had majors, officers who had served in Korea who were reverted back to sergeants in order to keep their seniority and retire. So there was a lot of that, and there were a fair number of enlistees, but still primarily the draft as a source of soldiers.
Okay. Now, once you get to the end of your 16 weeks of training, and now the war in Korea is pretty much shut down, what do they do with you after those 16 weeks?
Practically nothing. They needed to find something for us to do. I ended up, got out of basic training. Guys were shipping off to go various places to disperse them because they were in the process of closing down Camp Atterbury. I got assigned to a group who was responsible for firing the furnaces. They had these coal-fired furnaces that heated the barracks, and my assignment was from midnight until 7 to keep the fires going for a while. A terrible, dull, boring job, and I had great fear that I was going to do that for the next, for my year and a half. And I almost did, and I think I did it for maybe 6 months. I had been out of basic training. I was there firing furnaces for a while, and fearful that was going to continue. And they got the call to the camp was officially going to close totally, and they called me in for an interview to, what are you going to do with people? And there was a corporal or somebody doing the interviewing, and as the Army worked, he had a list. He had these people were going to go to Europe, these people were going to go to Korea, Far East. And I'm talking to this corporal who was a little more experienced than I am, and trying to figure out what I'm going to do. We established rapport in our interview. He said, you went to college? I said, yeah, I went to Michigan State for a year. Well, he said, oh, no kidding, I went to, I believe it was UCLA. We had played him in football. Yeah. So we talked football a little bit. He said, well, you don't want to go to Korea. You want to go to Europe. So, okay. I'm going to go to Europe. But it happened almost that way. That I was, he took me off the Korean list and put me on the European list. I went with the basic military MOS, military occupation specialty. I was combat infantryman.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot the number of it, but that was my assignment to travel.
It's 11 Bravo in Vietnam. Was that what they called it? Was it?
Oh yeah.
Infantry.
Oh yeah.
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 All right. Now, how did they get you over to Europe?
Troop ship. We reported to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. I went on leave, had something like a week to report to New Jersey for shipping. First time I'd been to New York, awesome experience to take the train into Grand Central Station and get down to Camp Kilmer, where we were processed pretty effectively, as I remember, for a week or so, and they got us out of there and headed us up to New York on a troop ship to head for Europe. 10 days on a troop ship. Same ships that had carried people in World War II, pretty much.
Okay, was these like the victory ships or things like that, or were they bigger transports?
I don't remember how many people were on a big boat, big ship. Yeah.
All right. And what was the weather like on the way over?
Not bad. April. It was pretty good. It was spring-like weather.
Mm-hmm.
We had dreams of boats being sunk and so forth. But I was seasick for part of the time. But it was just time spent. You did KP and cleanup duty and so forth, which you could skip out on and hide from if you were clever. So it was pretty chaotic. And once they got us into Germany, there was a big dispersal of Bremerhaven. In those days was the point of embarkation. Mm-hmm. And then they dispersed people out in various places in Germany where they were going to go.
Yeah, and so where did they send you?
Frankfurt. I was delighted, but to be in Germany post World War II was good duty. Germans accepted Americans well, hated the Russians, mm-hmm. But Americans were almost saviors. So that was almost a year I had in the Frankfurt area in Germany, which was prime duty. It was almost 8 to 5 job kind of thing. I could go into Frankfurt. I enjoyed a German-American club, which was a social group, met on Friday night with German students and German citizens, along with a few Army people who mm-hmm. wanted to do that kind of thing. Great fun, a great point in my life.
Now, what unit were you assigned to?
4th Infantry Division, mm-hmm. And I didn't type. The most important single qualification ability you can have in the Army, if you're a grunt, mm-hmm. Is to type. Mm-hmm. If you can type, they'll find some job for you, and you won't be carrying a rifle. That's just a given. I didn't type. I never learned to type, so they didn't know what to do with me, and I shuffled around for a better part of a year. Never got promoted beyond private first class. Most guys made corporal. Mm-hmm. Nobody made sergeant in 2 years, but if you were a good soldier, you made corporal. I wasn't a very good soldier. I wasn't disciplined. I was, almost counting the days when I was going to get out and go back to school under the GI Bill.
All right. So what did you actually do then?
They didn't know what to do. I put me in Division Ordinance. Ordinance does all kinds of supply and auxiliary services. They created a job for me of keeping track of dead-lying vehicles, jeeps, trucks, tanks that were broken down, mm-hmm. waiting to get repaired. And my assignment was to somehow keep track of these things and find out week by week where they were. It was a total boondoggle. It didn't work. It was paperwork and top of paperwork, and not productive, not worthwhile, and it had me increasingly counting the days until I'm out of here and get back to school.
All right. Now, what kind of sort of physical accommodations did you have?
We stayed in what were German barracks in Frankfurt, and where German soldiers had been housed. It was, I don't know, more than a couple of miles from downtown, from the center of the city. Frankfurt was pretty well bombed out in the war. I remember going down by the Opera House, which was a classic opera house, huge building, beautiful structure, that they had hit with an incendiary bomb in the middle of it, and it was just a shell of a building. The whole superstructure was standing, but it was gutted with fire. It stood there for, well, 45, and I was there in 54. So 9-10 years. There was a whole lot of destruction left in Germany from the war, in those spots that they had bombed.
And did you see rebuilding going on in the city or elsewhere?
To see them going up?
Were they rebuilding at that point?
Yeah, a lot of structure. That particular one was not a high priority because it was an opera house. And it did eventually get restored, but rebuilding was a big part of what was happening in Europe. Plus training. We were constantly reminded that the Russians are just over the hill, and they're going to come next month or the month after that. The Russians are coming. They sold that. We went on alert. I think once a month we had to be on alert. It was combat alert. It was as though war is declared. You head for the field and hunker down, and you're ready to fight from the field. It was total mess, total chaos. But
now, when that happened, did you have to pack up and go out in the field for the rest of it?
Once a month. Dreaded. It was discipline broke down. It was a pretty chaotic time of when the army is not at war. What do you do with all the people? And that's where we were when I was there.
All right. Now, while you were there, did you get a chance to do any traveling around?
Oh, it was wonderful. It was wonderful. I had I don't know, a full year of leave time, 30 days of coming. So I went to Italy, visited Venice, Rome, Naples, took another leave to Vienna, and another leave up to London. So I had I had 30 days of marvelous travel, cheap, and I could do all kinds of things.
Okay, so even though you were a private, you sort of had enough money to be able to do that kind of thing?
Travel was pretty much free. You could get a military pass. Yeah. You could go almost anywhere you wanted to, and you know we were still under a wartime economy. The American dollar was the black market was big. Cigarettes were you know a source of trade. If you had cigarettes, you could trade them in Europe for God I don't know what awfully high prices. We got them free pretty much. So the black market was a big thing in the war, at the end of the war. Maybe it is any time, I don't know. But,
yeah. But it was a good time to be an American tourist.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I was grateful for it. It would have cost me, as a civilian, to visit and have the leave time that I had. I would have had to have been relatively rich to travel that way.
All right. Now, the people that you were serving with were a lot of just sort of other draftees like yourself, or
almost totally. A handful. The military was busy trying to sort out who did they want to keep, and who they were going to get them out of here because they were, you know, draftees. There was a distinction between regular Army, RA, which is part of your serial number. If you were regular Army, you were that was noted, and you were on a career track that somehow they'd move up corporal sergeant and stay in. The vast majority obviously didn't. They were processed and going to get out.
Okay. And what about the officers?
They were in transition too. As I was saying, that I had an officer, a major, who just after I left reverted from major down to sergeant first class, which wasn't a very good thing. He'd been I don't know what he'd done, a combat officer or something. But during the war, he moved up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
If you were in any rank, if you survived and did a half decent job, you got promoted up far. The end of the war, you know, I say the end of the war, the end of the Korean War, there was nothing on the horizon except the Russians, and the army was diminishing in size, and there were a lot of cutbacks.
All right. Now, did you have a particular group of friends that you developed and hung out with, or were you kind of on your own?
Oh yeah. Or you associated with guys that you had something in common with. There were a lot of, when I went in, it was my first exposure to black people. I had grown up in northern Michigan, graduated high school there, had no blacks, and in our basic training group, I think half of them were probably from Detroit. Poor black kids who had a totally different culture than ours. I remember it was the first time I had ever heard the expression "motherfucker." I heard that so many times in the army from guys that became, dogged you out. But I'd never heard that in my quite isolated rural area. It was part of the language in the military.
And did you get along with these guys, or?
Yeah, it wasn't any problem. I had some guys were friends. They, well, I would say that there were people that I hung around with or went on leave with, but we were all in it together in that sense. And there was in that almost nobody liked the Army. Nobody was going to be a career person, and it was a matter of we're in this together, almost against the system. You did what you had to do to get by, but you knew that down the road you were going to be out of here. And it became the popular concept was he's a short timer. That training broke down, discipline broke down. You didn't care. The catchphrase was, "Listen, I'm so short I could stand on my head the rest of the time." And you counted the days. Anybody who had 2 or 3 months left were chalking them off on a calendar that they were going to get out of here.
All right. Now, you were mentioning there were sort of discipline issues and so forth, and also if you're living in a community with a lot of civilians around, there's also a lot of women around. So did a lot of guys have girlfriends and that kind of thing?
Prostitution was wide open. There weren't many jobs available in Germany, so there were prostitutes everywhere, cheap. Saturday night in downtown was pretty wild. Black market prostitution, a lot of drinking. Officers and non-commissioned officers almost all had girlfriends that they kept on the side. Class B dependents, I think they were called.
Okay, they had their own category.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and were there some cases where people had more serious relationships or things like that?
Some. I remember a kid that I lived with in New York took a leave and went to Paris and went to the Louvre. And he met a girl at the Louvre that he absolutely fell in love with. She was a prostitute. And he spent, the last 3 or 4 months trying to make some kind of arrangement so he could get back to her and marry her and bring her back. He was just smitten with it. And I don't know what became of him. He finally got shipped out. And, but yeah, some people did develop relationships. A handful married German girls and came back.
All right. And while you were there, did you learn much German?
I say what?
Did you learn German, or did you just?
Not enough. I would like to have. Everybody spoke English. Our German American club, half of the people were German. There were students, professional people, many of them. Everybody wanted to speak English. Nobody, if you hesitatingly tried to speak German, they'd let's speak English. I'd rather do that than speak German.
Now, at the German American Club, what were they interested in talking about?
Anything, cultural things. We traveled. I remember we took a trip to Heidelberg on a Sunday afternoon, had dinner at the castle. Social things, cultural things. It was totally divergent from the military, and there weren't too many guys that were interested in doing that kind of thing. On Friday night, most people would be in the bars and in the guest houses chasing whores or doing something. The German American Club, we had students, and it was a pretty good cultural thing. Most of the guys were college guys.
Yeah.
And,
so how did you hook up with that?
I heard about it. There was a downtown in Frankfurt, and in every village there was the service clubs, and it was part of one of the things you could do was join a German American Club, which I did early on. An interesting group of people. I remember that the head of the group was a black man by the name of Joe Bunch, nephew of the UN delegate Ralph Bunch. Okay. A very sophisticated guy, spoke excellent German, and he headed the group up socially. I don't know what became of him, but during that time he was the president and did a marvelous job of bringing us together. And discussion and a social group. It saved my life. It was a great, wonderful diversion from the military, and, to get out on Friday night and go to the German American Club.
All right. Now, how long did you spend in Germany? Was it a year?
Almost a year. Almost half of my time in the service was in Germany.
And are there particular kind of memories of that time or things that happened that stand out that you haven't brought into the story here yet?
Well, yeah, I remember, I don't know, I remember being anxious to get out. That was my primary goal.
Mm-hmm.
And, I knew that once I was done, I had the GI Bill, which is a free ride to college.
Mm-hmm.
That was the greatest program that ever created by the government, probably, and, including Social Security and whatever other social programs we passed. That helped more guys like me who would have been stuck. I had a free ride almost through my master's degree when I came back.
Okay, so 2 years was enough to earn you basically 4 years of college.
I don't know what the formula was for it, but it was pretty good. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was enough money so that, of course, college wasn't that expensive. It was enough to get you through the GI Bill. Plus the prestige of going in. I remember coming back to school. I was a veteran, and that was a distinction that the kids who had not been in the service didn't have. So we had maturity, prestige, and respect built in from having been in the service. Changed the whole. I remember at Michigan State and going back there, changed the whole. The controlling social group at the University of College then was the Veterans Club. Fraternities had lost their clout, and it was but kid stuff. And
Yeah, because when you first went there, the Korean War was going on, there weren't that many returning veterans yet. The World War II guys would have gone through already and come out.
Yep.
So it would have mostly traditional students you started with.
Yep.
All right, but then you go out and you come back, and now it's the veterans.
Mm-hmm.
They know that happened after World War II. It had that similar kind of effect. Okay, so you spend your year in Germany, and then now, did you know the exact date you were going to leave, or pretty close to it, or how did that work?
well, I'm holding my breath. I thought, well, I'm getting short. I'm down to like 2 weeks left in the military, or 3 weeks, and I'm waiting for my orders daily that I'm going to ship out. Well, it didn't come. They were flying guys at the time. I thought, well, I'll fly back. I'm getting short. Well, it didn't happen. I had to go back on a troop ship. That took. Seemed like it was longer going back than it was going over. I was pretty anxious to get out. But they processed people pretty fast. They didn't want to keep anybody. The military had a deadline that your draft period was up, conscription for 2 years, and they did a pretty good job of getting you out of there before the 2 years were up. I'm not sure what the laws governing that were.
No, where did they actually discharge you? Was that New York or back in Indiana or somewhere?
Back to Chicago,
Okay.
Great Lakes training base. I think, I can't remember exactly, but we came back into New Jersey, and I think we were immediately on a train, almost off the boat on a train heading for Chicago, where we were for about a week. It was pretty fast. I remember huge lines of people in the Army of running through, of checking your stuff out, getting your papers straight, and signing out. It took maybe less than a week that they processed us out, and all of a sudden you were free. It was like the gates had opened, and it was over.
So now, did you just go back and sort of start up college the next term, or what did you do?
Immediately, I got out of I think Thursday afternoon or Friday. Went immediately back to Traverse City, where the new community college had opened. Monday morning, first thing, I was in the office of the college and said, I want to go to school. And he said, first, well, we're 3 weeks into the quarter, but if you want to take a couple classes, we'll get you in. So I was out of the Army on Friday, back in college on literally on Monday, and it was quick.
All right, and now that you were back in college, did you do better than you did the first time?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I had maturity and a sense of recognition that this was a great chance that, and if I blew it, I was going to be screwed, and Lord knows what I'd have to do. So I was serious about it and became pretty good student in that maturity.
And then did you go back down to Michigan State to
I
finish
did,
up?
finished an associate degree. I'd had a year at Michigan State, which was, I probably accumulated half normal credits, but finished up, got an associate degree, went back to Michigan State and finished up a baccalaureate degree there.
Okay, and what did you major in?
Political science. I don't know why. My brother had majored in political science at the University of Michigan, and I was following his line. And I took a teacher's certificate and wound up for a few years as a government teacher in high school. I probably wouldn't study political science again if I had to do over again, but who knows? And when you're an undergraduate and trying to get out with some kind of a liberal arts degree.
Right. So you move on from political science. Now what do you do?
I spent first 5 years out teaching. In 1955 and 58 when I got out, anybody with a teaching certificate, any male could get a job. There was a tremendous demand for teachers. I had a minor in English and was hired as an English teacher, English and social studies teacher. And I think I had half a dozen places at least that the recruiting office was looking for young men. And so I taught for 5 years, and I had gone from making $4,000 a year up to $5,200 a year after 5 years, which wasn't a hell of a lot of money. So I decided I'd get out and do something else. I took a job with the civil service, worked for the state of Michigan, and jumped around. In the 50s and 60s, jobs were in great abundance. Young people could switch jobs wherever and better themselves almost automatically, which I did. And I worked as a publishing company representative, as a pharmaceutical salesman, as a real estate salesman, and made a living, which I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and I really didn't have to. And I ultimately went back to graduate school because I decided I wanted to get back into public education, and took a master's degree and retired after 20-some years, I guess, with public schools.
Okay, and where were you working then?
Here in Grand Rapids, mostly. I had taught in 4 different school districts. 4 years working in colleges. I worked as an admissions officer when I finished graduate school. I worked for Aquinas College for a couple of years, and Nazareth College in Kalamazoo, which is now closed. Chief recruiting officer was my function, traveling high schools, trying to get kids to go sign up to go to school.
All right. So you said a little bit about this, but again, overall, what kind of effect do you think the time in the service had on you, or how were you different when you came out?
Oh, totally. It was. I think anybody who served in the military came out a different person. There's the old saying in the Army that I wouldn't take $1 million for the experience, but I would do it again for $1 million. Pretty much that. I grew up. It offered me financial independence. There was respect involved that you had served, and the country, again, the GI Bill was a saving grace for any number of people in my generation who would not have gone to college without it. Paid the government off by huge dividends from that in the program.
All right. Of course, then once you were back and you were working and so forth, you kind of get into the Vietnam era, and that attitude toward military and veterans and so forth changed. I mean, how did you view all of that, or did that affect you?
Well,
in any way?
I had grown up, as we all did, with a sense of patriotism. I didn't know. I was a farm boy. If the president, if the CIA, if Congress said this is right, if those Russians are really bad and the Koreans are nasty, then we believed that. It was a righteous, fair situation. That died gradually, and by Vietnam it was half dead. I suppose I suspect no more than half of the people in Vietnam believed in what they were doing. But in the Korean War, World War 2.4, as it was called, we had the same, pretty much the same sense of commitment to the cause as did the people in World War II. It was the right thing to do. Those people were evil, they were nasty, and the enemy, and we had to get rid of them. Well, and I went through that same transition. By Vietnam, I was pretty, which I wasn't involved in, but I was pretty certain this was the wrong place at the wrong time, and it was not the right thing to do.
That sort of thing. And then when you saw sort of the anti-war protests and things like that on television or anything else like that, did you take that at all personally? Or?
Oh yeah. I was back in graduate school when Kent State occurred. That was maybe the primary turning point when they turned American rifles against college students. There was something wrong here. I went to Washington along with a group. Some people from Grand Valley. We loaded up to go to Nixon's last inaugural to demonstrate, and there were, tens of thousands of us there. Probably the biggest demonstration since civil rights. But we went to demonstrate against the war, against Nixon, and against the whole process. And that was the beginning or continuation of my inclination to be a liberal radical, I guess.
All right. Well, it makes for an interesting story. So I'd like to just close by thanking you for taking the time to share it today.
Thank you. It was fun.